So I've done something which I didn't think I'd do for a very long time. I didn't think it would happen this soon. I thought I'd stick to my guns. I thought I'd made such a brilliant point about the presence of the M1 chip in the iPad that I'd never have to go back on my word. Earlier this month, I ordered an M1 iPad Air, and it is all iPadOS 16's fault. And this is a bit weird because I didn't really get what I wanted for the iPad at this year's WWDC. There was no significant leap forward for iPadOS, and there wasn't a single whiff of a Pro app like Final Cut Pro for the iPad. But there's no denying that Apple is finally making a few strides forward with its tablet. The presence of the M1 only updates in the next version of iPadOS left me with no choice but to finally bite the bullet and get my hands on the latest generation of the hardware. But don't worry, I have a plan. Don't worry, I won't rehash all of my thoughts on the M1 iPad because if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that I think it has been an utterly pointless waste of time until now. Possibly. I have 4 iPads in this studio and in my life, which is 3 too many for any sensible human being, but none of them feature the M1 chip, and until now, I haven't missed that at all. If you're interested, those iPads are my 2018 12.9-inch iPad Pro, the brilliant iPad Mini 6, an iPad 9, and this, which is the 4th generation iPad Air. Ignore the smudges. I'm actually trading this iPad for the M1 iPad Air 5, which should be arriving today as I'm filming, and when it arrives, it will be immediately placed into this lovely white Magic Keyboard. And obviously I will be attaching a paper-like screen protector, which I've got ready here. Guys, if you haven't tried one of these yet, they are fantastic. They basically, as you would guess from the name, make your iPad feel like a paper notebook. Brilliant if you do any kind of writing or drawing on your iPad. And you can also, just out of interest, if you are interested, get a Pro bundle now, where you can get the paper-like screen protector, a cleaning kit as well, which I've handily got down here, and a set of pencil grips for your Apple Pencil. Great price, really worth looking at. I will put a link in the description. But despite the arrival of my M1 iPad Air, which I am looking forward to, the rest of that iPad lineup that I mentioned a moment ago will remain resolutely in service. For instance, the iPad Mini is still my default note taker and content consumption device, and the iPad 9 I'm actually using right now in front of me as an auto cue for these videos. And that 12.9-inch iPad Pro is actually sat behind me over here, which is used mainly as a media and lighting controller for this studio. But this has always been my point about the M1 iPad. I've never felt anywhere close to pushing the limits of my current range of iPads. Even that 2018 iPad Pro, which is ancient by today's standards, feels as fast as the day I bought it. However, iPadOS 16 is going to change all of this, and it really is about time too. There are 2 features arriving in iPadOS 16 which really excite me. The first is Stage Manager, which is a completely new way of multitasking on Apple's tablet. It shares the same user interface and experience found in the feature of the same name on macOS Ventura, but for some reason, the iPad version is of far more interest to me. I've noted plenty of times in the past that I just don't like the way that Apple has implemented multitasking in iPadOS thus far. It feels tacked on, clumsy, and worse, completely undiscoverable unless you know it's there. In fact, I get the impression that Apple would really rather it not be an option. That's how useless it is. Adding Stage Manager to iPadOS 16 in what is practically a replica of the Mac version is, therefore, I think, a complete stroke of genius. It adds consistency to the 2 platforms and finally, hopefully, fingers crossed, delivers proper multitasking and overlapping resizable windows on the iPad. That's all we wanted. The second exciting feature in iPadOS 16 is directly related to Stage Manager and comes in the form of proper external display support. Finally. To use this, you simply connect your iPad to a monitor via a Thunderbolt cable and suddenly gain access to an additional screen rather than a mirrored version of what you can already see on the iPad, which is the only way that works at the moment. Combined with Stage Manager, this new form of external support for the iPad enables you to keep up to 8 apps visible at once. That's basically 4 on each display, and drag and drop apps between those 2 screens. If the Craig Federighi demos and the reports from my YouTuber friends are anything to go by, this could be, possibly, what finally sways me more wholesomely into the world of iPad productivity. I think. So as mentioned earlier in this video, my shiny new M1 iPad Air is due for delivery today as I film, which means it's going to arrive just in time for the public beta of iPadOS 16 in July. Once that's available, I'll be switching some of my key tasks to the iPad and relying on Stage Manager, external display support, and those tasty updates to the Files apps to see how it all feels. Now, those tasks do relate mainly to the blogging side of this business, like the writing and the publishing and that sort of stuff. If you didn't know, I have a very active daily blog. I'll put a link in the description. But I do get the feeling, and this is what excites me, that there'll be a significant number of other kind of admin, businessy type jobs that I could potentially move from my M1 MacBook Air to this new M1 iPad Air with these updates. We'll see. And I'd dearly love for those updates and the M1 chip to improve my working relationship with the iPad. Oh, and for those who have asked, I will definitely be pitching these iPadOS 16 updates against Samsung DeX at some stage, I promise. I'm sure there's plenty of iPad owners out there who are disappointed by the lack of non-M1 support for features like Stage Manager and that new external display wizardry. And I do agree that it's a tough pill to swallow, particularly if you've spent a lot of money on a non-M1 iPad recently. But this is what progress often looks like, I'm afraid. Apple is starting to make it very clear that the M series chips are the future of the iPad. I think Stage Manager and the external display support are just the start of what is going to be an increasing tidal wave of M1 specific updates for the iPad. Basically, it's only going to get worse from here if you haven't got a compatible iPad. We're gradually entering a completely new era for the iPad, and while it's going to be painful for some, I do feel your pain, trust me. I personally cannot wait to get my hands on the public beta in July. Expect loads of content once I start using that iPad. If you want to find out more about my full thoughts on iPadOS 16 and everything that was announced by Apple a few weeks back, keep watching for a link to my full WWDC reaction video.